Hello everyone, my name is Jin and I'm here today with my colleagues Elissa, Rachel, and Jasmine to present our findings on our rapid review that we conducted for the City Lab Research Project. We were presented with an issue of drug use in public spaces owned by the Hamilton Street Railway, or HSR, mainly in bus terminals and public bathrooms. When looking for a potential solution to this problem, we found in the literature that homelessness is associated with public drug use, as oftentimes this population has no secure location to use drugs. Research also shows that there's a relationship between public drug use and criminal activity as well. Given these relationships, we decided to focus on homelessness as a key variable in our research and explore housing as an intervention. In our question, we also added public disturbance and discarded supplies as outcomes, as these can be indicators of drug use in the population affected by homelessness. We developed the following research question. How do housing interventions, including but not limited to housing first, affect drug use, substance-related public disturbance, discarded supplies, and criminal activity in adults experiencing homelessness in urban communities in high-income countries?
So for the overall methodology guidance, we referred to the Rapid Review Guidebook. Jin reviewed the rationale for the research question we formulated as a group. That question directly informed the search strategy that was developed to include appropriate search terms for the population, intervention, and outcomes that we were interested in. Our population of interest is adults experiencing homelessness, and we also included terms like unstably housed, vulnerably housed, and residential instability, and others. We searched for housing interventions with a variety of terms like housing, residential support, and homeless, adjacent to intervention, among others. The final group of search terms related to our outcomes of interest, which were substance use, public disturbance, criminal activity, and discarded supplies. And so a variety of search terms were compiled to capture these outcomes. For example, not only substance use, but substance abuse, drug use, and drug abuse. A full copy of the search strategy is found in our report. The search was conducted in the 6 electronic databases listed here, and these concepts also informed our inclusion and exclusion criteria, which are shown in the table. We added more detail to the criteria for screening purposes, such as limiting to urban and high-income communities, and specifying the research designs we were interested in. All search results were imported to the reference manager Covidence for title and abstract and full text screening. All included studies were appraised for quality using the appropriate checklist from the Joanna Briggs Institute and given an overall rating of low, moderate, or high. All screening and critical appraisals were conducted independently in duplicate, and conflicts were resolved through discussion. Data was extracted from included studies by one reviewer and checked for accuracy by a second reviewer. Finally, the entire team met to review all findings. Higher quality evidence was given more consideration than lower quality evidence. And as a group, we identified common themes and whether there was a clear direction or magnitude of effect for housing interventions on our outcomes of interest. And these were compiled into key points.
So our Prisma diagram shown here includes the process that we used to complete this review. It tracks the reasons that we included and excluded studies of the 3,634 that we started with. We ultimately ended up with 32 included studies, which we screened, appraised, and extracted data from. We then synthesized that data into key findings and points, which are summarized on the next slide. The key findings from our review include that there are mixed results between no observed effect of housing interventions and an improved effect of housing interventions on substance use and criminal activity. This is a conclusion that is supported by the highest quality evidence that we found. While this evidence does not provide a clean answer to our question, another key finding is that no harmful effect of housing, especially in comparison to treatment as usual, has been observed in our findings. Additionally, among the studies we synthesized, a few show limited evidence for abstinence contingent housing as more effective for reducing substance use than non-abstinence contingent housing. However, the evidence for this is limited by a low number of studies, and this outcome is also dependent on how long follow-up is conducted for. Some further evidence and knowledge gaps include that we found more information on substance use than criminal activity as outcomes due to the sensitive nature of criminal activity information. Furthermore, there is limited to no evidence on discarded supplies or public disturbance that we could find. Additionally, our review looked at substance use and criminal activity as outcomes, but there are many other outcomes that are important to take into account when deciding whether this is a beneficial intervention for this population. And some of those outcomes can include number of days housed, mental health outcomes, or physical health outcomes, just as an example. There are also ethical concerns evident, and those ethical concerns prevent there being large differences between the intervention and control groups. For example, in many of our studies, the control group also had access to case management or community services, which eventually may provide access to housing to them as well. This similarity in control and intervention groups may affect researchers' ability to observe differences between the groups. Furthermore, the methods used for many of the studies included limited to no blinding, so participants and people evaluating their outcomes often knew exactly which group they were allocated to and what treatments they were receiving. And many of our studies included self-reported measures, which could lead to bias in the results, especially if participants are underreporting how much substance abuse they feel that they have engaged in.
Due to the limited conclusions that we were able to draw from our findings, here are our recommendations. So we do recommend the provision of housing as a potential solution to the issue of public drug use on the HSR. Though the findings were mixed regarding whether or not there was a significant difference on outcomes between groups receiving a housing provision intervention and treatment as usual groups, no studies reported a detrimental effect on outcomes. In fact, in most studies, both the treatment as usual and the housing prevention groups improved on the outcomes of interest, with the housing provision groups improving more, just not significantly more. So this is why we recommend it. But in addition, further research is needed on the matter before it is implemented. So there is a need to generate and identify studies which follow participants for a longer period of time, studies which report on more public drug use related outcomes, such as the one we were unable to find, and studies which compare housing provision configurations. For example, comparing housing first with case management and housing first without case management. Once this research is synthesized, it will then be more clear how exactly the intervention could be implemented in conjunction with the issue at hand. But in the meantime, as housing provision has no identified harm, it is a good solution. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is listed here, and there are a lot more details in our full rapid review report.